my God, wait till I tell you the things that I learned at that zero tolerance conference. You're not going to believe it. But first, here's a quick summary of what happened.
The First Minister heckled at a charity event by campaigners who fear gender recognition reforms could have safety implications for women. The UN independent advisor calling for the legislation to be paused while further safeguards are considered. As the Scottish Government's gender recognition reforms progress, controversy continues. But ministers have once again stressed that appropriate protections for women are in place. Our political correspondent Kirsten Campbell reports.
Shame on you, you're letting down vulnerable women in Scotland.
The First Minister was at an event to mark 30 years of the Zero Tolerance campaign to end male violence against women when she was challenged about the bill to make it easier to change gender.
In my long experience now, most men who commit violence against women don't feel the need to change gender to do that.
Women's rights campaigners have protested before. They now have the support of a United Nations expert on violence against women who's calling for the legislation to be paused while fears about the risks to women's safety are addressed.
The concern here is that it makes it easier for violent males to take advantage of the process and therefore also have access to spaces that are really designed for women in all their diversity, but also single-sex spaces, and including shelters, prisons, and so on and so forth.
Some politicians agree the government needs to take more time.
We need to make sure that women and girls' voices are heard in the Scottish Parliament, but they don't want to be at threat from predatory men in their single-sex spaces. And I think we need the First Minister to listen and to hear the concerns that they have, not to be silenced.
Ministers insist there are protections in place.
Will she listen to the women's organisations in gender, Just Right Scotland, Scottish Women's Rights Centre, the Chief Executive of Scottish Women's Aid, the Director of Amnesty International and the Chief Executive of Rape Crisis Scotland, who have all written to Ms Salam to tell her about the safeguards that are currently in place to protect women in the GRR bill.
MSPs are expected to pass the bill before Christmas. Kirsten Campbell, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
I'd like to take a moment to describe for you the nature of the women at the Zero Tolerance Conference. You have to understand they're a very unusual species. They're very middle class, very educated. They've obviously come from university, done some kind of sociology type of degree, and they've come to the professional classes with lots of passion and kindness and wanting to change the world and make it a better place. So in terms of their commitment to their roles, they cannot be faulted. However, they're also paid for. All of their salaries, all of their activities are paid for by the state. That means their charity, their third sector, their voluntary organisation, their public sector organisation are all pretty much paid for by the state. And let me think, who runs the state in Scotland these days? I wonder. And so when they all come lining up to try and tell everybody, oh, we support Nicola Sturgeon, the engenders of the world, Scottish rape crisis, you know, all of these people, you know, the vast majority of their income comes from Nicola Sturgeon. We're talking Rape Crisis Scotland. We're talking Scottish Women's Aid. We're talking Scottish Women's Rights Centre. We're talking, well, maybe not the director of Amnesty International, but you know, maybe they went to the same school, who knows. Anyway, the point is, how on earth could they possibly say that they are independent advisors to the Scottish Government who have been asked and commissioned to report on the Gender Recognition Reform Bill when they're paid for by their Paymaster General herself, Nicola Sturgeon? I ask you, they've picked the wrong women to fight with. That's all I'm going to say. Watch this space. There was another very important incident that happened on that fateful day at the Zero Tolerance Conference. I had the honour and privilege of sitting at the same table as the head of Edinburgh Rape Crisis, none other than Myrtle Warwarwa. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the name, no offence obviously. But he was very enlightening. He informed me as he scanned over the scene of all these 96% of white middle class ladies who were in the room. He said to me they're all female patriarchs. And I was like, what on earth are you talking about? What's a female patriarch then when they're at home? I can understand matriarch, but patriarch, what's this? A female patriarch. So he tells me that a female patriarch is a feminist who brings all of her prejudices and racism to the job. Apparently all the old feminists were all racist in Scotland, and that was a terrible thing. And I was quite shocked, because sitting next to me was a former chair or board member of Zero Tolerance Scotland. She was fizzing. She was like, excuse me. Well, she didn't say anything. She was very polite, but I could see the expression on her face. She was basically being accused of being a racist. And the basic idea is that the female patriarchs are determined to make sure that they privilege other white women who are biologically female. And that's a terrible thing, he said, because that's patriarchy in a female biological... Oh, I couldn't really follow it myself. But you know what I mean? Basically, what I couldn't understand before I'd gone to this event was why on earth are these professional women so invested in this particular ideology, take apart the idea of they're paid for by Nicola Sturgeon. But let's look at the fact that they're walking around feeling apologetic about their privilege and about the fact that the generations that they were before them, they were actually full of bigotry. I just could not believe my ears. So that is yet another incident that happened on that fateful day. I'd love to hear what you think about all this. I'm sure it must be perplexing you as much as it is me. Am I right?